Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for Nerds by Nerds, and today I have James, and I should have asked you how you pronounce your last name before we got started.
That's okay. James Haeck.
Haeck. Okay, I would have totally butchered that for sure, without a doubt. And I'm so happy to get you on here finally. We started talking a while ago. And how are you this morning?
I'm doing great. I'm really happy to be on the show. I've combed through a lot of your web archives just because I love the reviews over there. I love the discussion, all of that. I know that Kobold Press has gotten some good press over there. I'm wearing their T-shirt today, not that you can see it. Um, but I never really have the chance to watch your stream content. So if nothing else, I'm happy to be on it.
So awesome. So you've done work for Green Ronin,
Mm-hmm.
Kobold Press. You're over there on the DMs Guild as well. So Geek and Sundry. So you got some nice credits to your name.
Thank you. And let me add to that an upcoming project with Wizards of the Coast, and that's all I can tell you about that.
You and Dan Dillon both. I've been stalking Dan for a while to figure out what he's working on, but I'm like, late at night, he's got to slip it sometime. Nope, never
Mm-hmm.
does. So that's exciting.
It's very exciting. I wish I could talk to you more about that, but NDAs are a crippling thing. But that's fine. I've got plenty of other stuff to chat with you about, with Kobold Press and Critical Role and all of that.
Yeah. So what are you working on now that you can talk about? Let's start there.
Yeah, let's start there. Right now, a lot of my game design effort is going right towards Kobold Press. They're, in my opinion, they're one of the best third-party publishers out there in the business today. And their new Patreon campaign, their Warlock, is it's maybe the best place to get 5e supplements because of its beautiful old school look. It's got some of the best designers in the business working on it: Dan Dillon, Sean Merwin, Wolfgang Bauer, names that you must know if you're playing D&D. And if you're a certain tier of subscriber on there, I don't know the exact money number. It's not really important, but they will deliver a print copy of this booklet to your mailbox every other month. And it's beautiful. It's got the last Warlock issue had this gorgeous cover illustration by Jeff D, who's this classic D&D artist. He did art for White Plume Mountain. He did art for, first edition stuff. And I'm just overjoyed to have anything that I've written be stamped with that stamp of approval, that old school look.
All right. So they're saying we're getting a little echoey when you talk. We'll see. I just lowered my volume on my side a little bit and see if
Okay.
that doesn't help. So you guys can let me know when James talks if it's still echoey. Yeah, Kobold Press is there's the trifecta, the top three for me that are kind of third party. They're probably Frog God, Kobold Press, and Nord Games are all really good.
Very cool.
And I feel like Nord Games is probably a little bit of an up and coming
Yeah.
company that isn't as well known, but they've been putting out some solid stuff too.
Very cool. Yeah, I don't know them particularly well. I've heard of Frog God. I know Kobold Press likes to work together with them, but I don't know of Nord Games so much.
Check them out. Chris Haskin, we've had him on a few times. Great guy, and they're always looking for more writers as well.
Pretty cool.
So and as a freelance writer, I guess you're always looking for people looking for more writers.
Yeah. Right now, for me, I've entered a period of sort of reevaluating my priorities as a writer. I'm doing my best right now to shed stuff that is not worth it for me anymore and focusing more on the stuff that really is. In particular, the business of freelance writing is always an important thing to my heart. um, Being a freelancer in the RPG industry is a tough gig. I don't think there are many people who make it at all. Um, a couple of years ago, Morris over at EN World put out a great article on what is a freelancer worth, and there's another good piece that AlphaStream put out as well. AlphaStream's one of my favorite D&D bloggers, by the way. He's always got real good insight. And it's all about how people who are working in the RPG industry can do their best to make a living wage. And for most people, the answer is have a day job. And that's really the same for any artist, right? If you're an actor, or if you are a screenwriter, or if you're a novelist or whatever, you got to have a day job to support yourself. I've been very fortunate to have projects that are high profile and that are by publishers large enough to pay me well to do it. And as much as I love to do the work purely for artistic endeavor, and I always strive to put that personal artistic touch into what I do, there comes a point when you just have to make ends meet and pay your bills. But the great thing about that is that places like Kobold Press and Green Ronin, and when you can get work with them, Wizards of the Coast, they are really very generous when it comes to how well they treat their writers. I think I lucked out big time when I found a stable place writing at Kobold Press, just because they're such kind people. For one, Wolfgang Bauer is one of the best bosses in the industry, I imagine, because he's got all this experience going back to TSR. He knows how the industry works, and he can make sure that his writers are happy working for him. Have you ever had the chance to talk with Wolfgang?
Yeah, we've actually had Wolfgang on before. We've had Zach from Frog God on before. Wolfgang's a great guy. I know Doug has interviewed him a couple times as well. And you kind of like talk about one of the things that like bothers me about the industry as the whole. Like I absolutely loathe the concept of pay what you want. I've never seen it in any other industry but this one. And what people fail to realize, it really lessens the talent pool that we get to draw from for RPGs, because as soon as someone who is going to pay people what they want to be paid, and instead of what other people want to pay them, they're going to go there. They're going to go work there, and it's going to be a different industry, and we lose a lot of talent that way, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, you look at any other paying industry, you look at, hell, even web editorial, right? You look at Gawker, IO9, Kotaku, Polygon, anything that works in gaming or pop media, they pay rates double, triple what even pretty established D&D writers make. And like, I try not to be bitter about that, because the RPG industry is a really small one. I mean, we pay what we can, and often that's not enough. But it comes down to either how many people are buying or how much people are willing to pay. And a lot of the time, people who play RPGs are accustomed to a certain level of frugality, because this game is so much about personal creativity and being able to create anything you want just by the virtue of your own game design skills. So it's a toss-up. I'm always happy when a group like D&D Beyond, for instance, is able to gather people together and find a way to make sure that their video creators like Todd Kenrick, or content writers like I'm sure will be coming to them eventually, are able to both produce really good content, stuff that people will want to read and want to consume, and that's informative, and also make it worth their while.
Well, fortunately now, like in this day and age, we got tons of streamers and lots of people putting out content. So hopefully the industry just keeps getting bigger, and it brings more money into it, so that we can, we can have more there for people to make a living off of, creating awesome things.
Yeah.
So of all your projects, you have, like you said, you've been working on Warlock. You worked on the tal'dorei campaign setting.
Mm-hmm.
which one was the most rewarding for you to work on, and you were the most excited to work on?
Um, it goes without saying that working on the tal'dorei campaign setting with Matt Mercer, just the two of us going back and forth creating together, was a dream come true. I was working at Geek and Sundry at the time, so being able to just link up with him and share notes and create together was frankly the simplest option for everyone involved, and it was the best option for all of us too. It's very rare to me, unless you're working on a really high profile thing, sort of WotC or Paizo level creation, to actually meet face to face and have constant communication with someone that you're working with. All the other freelance projects I've done, even with Kobold Press or whoever else, it's a pretty solitary activity. We writers just hole up in our cave and type away. But working with Matt, we were able to have shared documents and do Skype calls and all of this sort of writer's tennis, kicking back and forth ideas and saying, this is awesome. This shade barrow idea that you've come up with is great. Let's dig even deeper on that. Let's talk more about the Iron Authority. Or this thing, the Scar of the Cinder King that you've come up with is very much too much like something in World of Warcraft. Let's kick it back and forth a bit. Let's iterate on this and find something that really works for the core of this setting. Being able to find the heart of Critical Role was an incredibly rewarding process, especially working right with Matt, because Critical Role, he designed this setting, this tal'dorei campaign setting for his friends as frankly a generic D&D setting, something that people could leap into without any specialized knowledge. As long as they've heard of Lord of the Rings, they know what elves, humans, dwarves, and halflings are, they can do it. And from there, finding what was unique to tal'dorei, what sets it apart from every other setting. And it came down in many places to the different people and cultures in that setting. The Ashari were a huge draw for me. That's why I made 4 of them, 4 individual monster stat blocks for the back of that book. It was the vestiges of the divergence, these epic magic items that grow in power as the heroes who wield them perform great deeds. That's so crucial to the flavor of Critical Role that we had to lean into that especially hard. The effects of the Chroma Conclave, the 5 dragons that ravaged the land over the course of Critical Role, were crucial because you think of it's almost an apocalyptic event, going into creating a fantasy setting that isn't like Dark Sun levels of post-apocalyptic, but just has that little bit of flavor of something really bad has just gone down, and what scars has that left on the world. Literally, in some ways, there's a literal scar of the Cinder King that is this fiery gash that still burns to this day in the very land. But what are also the social repercussions of being dominated by a black dragon for months, if not over a year? How do the people of Westrun recover from something like that? And the answer is, in this case, talking specifically, the people of Westrun, they've got kind of this military dictatorship going on, and the people are trying to overcome that. They've just gone from one tyrannical leader, this black dragon Umbrasyl, to a tyrant almost, and they're trying to make sure that they are free again after that event.
So we're kind of new to Critical Role, and we kind of just jumped on with the new campaign. When we finally when it got on the radar for us, we're like, oh my God, there's like 1 million hours worth of Critical Role at this point. So it's funny because we all picked up the book and we're like, all this hard work you guys put into, no, we're not going to even use that, because we just cherry pick everything for our homebrew stuff. And even with the Wizards of the Coast products, like here's $50 for a book. I was so happy when I used like a paragraph from Storm King's Thunder. so so we kind of like homebrew everything, but we still like we're collectors. We like to we like to get what's go out there. We like to see how people are putting using the mechanics in their game or in their products, as the case may be. So along the Critical Role tal'dorei setting, Jacob Stokes has a question. First, he says, "Congrats on the success. How did you land a job working with Matt Mercer in Critical Role?"
There's a good story behind that. So I was still in university down in California. I live in Seattle, Washington, but I went to college down in Orange County, California, just because I wanted to change it up, right? I wanted to see if living somewhere other than Washington was for me. And frankly, I'm happy to be back home. But anyway, I was down there and I was just browsing Twitter. I didn't even have a Twitter account then. And I saw that Geek and Sundry had put out a call for interns. They're like, we need an intern desperately right now. And we're like, okay, well, that sounds awesome. Let me send in my resume. Let me go up there. And I got an internship over at Geek and Sundry. I put some of my D&D work. I put EN World EN5ider there. I showed that I was a guy to be trusted when it comes to D&D material. And Critical Role was still in its infancy when they did that. I don't think they had more than 30 episodes at the time. So the backlog was a little bit more manageable for me. So I just every free moment I had when I wasn't creating D&D articles for Geek and Sundry, I was listening to Critical Role in the background, thinking, "Well, damn, this campaign's actually pretty cool." And I know these voice actors. I know Matt Mercer from Fire Emblem, one of my favorite video game series. I know Liam O'Brien from Nier. I know Laura Bailey from Full Metal Alchemist. Right? I know all of these people, and the people I didn't know, I wanted to know more. And so I ended up, while I was working there, staying a little bit late, finding another way of getting home late that night, and just watching the show live on Thursdays. And I got to meet the cast, and I got to talk with Matt. And eventually, Geek and Sundry, not me, not Matt Mercer, but Geek and Sundry was approached by Green Ronin. And they said, "We've done books with you before. We did the Titan's Grave book, and that was a really big success for the both of us. This Critical Role thing is getting kind of big, don't you think? Let's do a book about it and let's see where that goes." And I'm pretty sure now this is one of their best-selling books of all time. The local game shops around here can't even keep it on the shelves. It just flies right off, which is a nice stroking of my ego, but a testament to the strength of the name Critical Role too. And so Geek and Sundry told Matt, "Hey, Green Ronin has partnered with us, and we are making a Critical Role book." And he's like, "I don't have time for this. I have a full-time job as a voice actor. I can do this in my spare time, but I want to have a life also." And so he wanted to reach out to someone who was already in the Geek and Sundry family, who knew a ton about D&D. He talked with me. He talked with Ryan Green, who is an awesome human being. He does the show Lore Masters on Geek and Sundry now, and he is also the technical producer on Critical Role. I messed up his job title for sure, but he's in charge of backstage when it comes to Critical Role. And so the three of us worked together. Ryan Green had to move on to other projects in the middle of that, but Matt Mercer gathered together a group of people who he trusted to make really good D&D stuff with him and help him fill in the blanks that he either didn't have the knowledge to fill or that he didn't have the time to fill. And it gave me a chance to work on something really cool. It gave him a chance to not destroy his social life while we're working on this as well.
Are you allowed to say there's something that Matt Mercer doesn't know how to do? The criticals are very passionate about Matt on things.
If there's something he, in big air quotes, doesn't know how to do, it's present D&D material in a publishable way. Like, his notes are really good. There's so much cool stuff in his notes, but there's a lot of reworking and hammering into shape that it takes to go from a DM's notebook to go to a published product. There's so much polish, and I have to give huge kudos to Green Ronin for the amount of shine and work and beautification that they've given to this book, because it's absolutely gorgeous, not just from an art perspective, but from a graphic design perspective, from a layout. It's beautiful. I've got my copy right here in front of me. I am hard pressed to like keep talking and not just get like lost in the art and the cool like blood spatters and gorgeous text that's all over this thing. The map is gorgeous too.
It is well put together. There's a lot of great content in there and material in there. The Ishari, I actually enjoyed them. I thought they were some of the better laid out NPCs. I'm a little critical of some things, like when I see something and it looks like really like it was ripped right out of the player's handbook the way it was built. I don't like that. I've been spoiled ever since Curse of Strahd, and they started building the NPCs as monsters more so than player characters. And I have a strong opinion about that. Now, I think all NPCs should be built that way. I just really enjoy it. Here's a question from Brian Smith. When collaborating with somebody to create an RPG world, how do you organize it all? Like, did you have photos strewn all around the place?
I'm thinking of that scene from Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the conspiracy wall, the Pepe Sylvia wall, with all these photos everywhere and string drawn between them. It was a little bit like that, I gotta say. It was a little bit messy and tied together with string. But no, on the whole, Matt and I had a really good organizational system going on. We already knew more or less what the shape of the book would be. We had the different chapters and parts all laid out. We had the gazetteer portion for all the different locations in tal'dorei. That was its own chapter. We had all of the gods in their own chapter, all the monsters and the races and all of that. And so we just had these shared documents opening Google Drive, and we had different colors of text to know who had written who had written what, and we were not shy about going in there and rewriting stuff that other people had written. If it didn't fit a vision or if it was too out there, we would always leave comments and be very respectful about what we were about what we were writing. But we knew that this product was bigger than the two of us. It encompasses an entire community of Critical Role fans. It encompasses the entire community of D&D fans. This has to be something that is not just the creation of Matt Mercer and James Haeck. This has to be the culmination of hundreds of thousands of people's love for Critical Role and for D&D as a whole.
Our Chief and Nerdator has a question for you. What's your gaming life like? DM a lot, and if so, is it a lot of design work, or does he take it easy for fun and use published adventures and stuff?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yes, I DM all the time. I just had a campaign that I was playtesting for something I've been writing, wrap up sort of right before Christmas time. And so for the past month or so, I've taken a little break from DMing. I have given my players a chance to sit in the GM seat for a while, play some other RPGs. I played Mouse Guard for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and that was a ton of fun. I loved the Redwall books as a kid, so it was really cool to just play a mouse and fight some snakes. Let's see, but just last weekend, I stepped back into the DM saddle again, and I pulled out a dungeon crawl from Tales of the Yawning Portal that I have been meaning to play for probably 2 or 3 years now. I just haven't gotten the right group together to run a dungeon crawl for real. And it's the Forge of Fury. And I guess to answer your question, I run published adventures a lot. I ran Princes of the Apocalypse in its entirety. I want to run Curse of Strahd. But I always do my best to put my own spin on it. For instance, I think about half of my Princes Apocalypse game took place in the elemental planes. And spoilers for Princes of the Apocalypse, but it all takes place on the material plane. There's none of that extra planar stuff happening. And every time I play a published adventure, I like to take 50% of what the book gives me, throw out the other half, and fill it in with all of my ideas. And that's the way published adventures ought to be played.
So I'm trying to figure out some sound issues, and they're saying it's silent, and they hear the chair creaking, so they weren't hearing you. Let me see. So you guys hear me? Because they were getting some echoing earlier, and I was trying to get rid of that. And you hasn't been.
Folks in chat, can you hear me? Am I still silent for you?
Let's see, guys. Can you hear him now? Thought maybe if I jumped the headphones, that would help, but it did not. All right. So we got a little bit of.
Can you hear Dave?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Check 1, 2.
We heard you. They heard me. All right. But you guys.
Both good.
Do you guys hear James is the question. I hear James.
I hear Dave. Looks to me like they can hear both of us. Cool.
All right. So we're back in. Yeah, cool. I'll just go back to flipping back and forth with muting myself when you're talking.
Yeah, keep the reverb from happening. That makes sense.
Yeah. So let me find the questions. We had a bunch of great questions.
Oh, I have one more thing to say about running adventures. I love running my own homebrew campaigns as well, but I'm very judicious about when I do that, because between writing for D&D and like prepping a homebrew adventure, it's very hard to find time to create my own campaign world and do all of that stuff. So when I do put in the effort to make that happen, I have to know that I want it. I can't just willy-nilly make campaign settings. I have to come up with an idea that really speaks to me and that I think will really speak to my players as well. One campaign I ran while I was still in school in California for a group of people, for a group of my classmates, was called A Rebellion in Dragos. And it was a game of monster characters taken from Volo's Guide to Monsters, but it wasn't an evil campaign. It wasn't a group of monsters ravaging the countryside, but rather the humans, the elves, the dwarves, everything that you would normally think of as a player character race were the villains. They were this evil empire from across the sea that had conquered the land of the non-humans, and they were attempting to rise up against their conquerors. And that was such an iconic, evocative image to me, and it spoke so well to my players, who were mostly members of marginalized groups. Right, they were either gay or they were non-white people, and so okay, cool. This is something that I think will really speak to their experience in the real world and give them an outlet for things that they've been feeling and their own creative expression. And so that worked really well for them. It was an awesome campaign. They really dug into it because they clicked so well with the themes of the campaign. And so that's the only time that I will create new campaign settings, when I think that I have a real winner on my hands.
Well, and that makes sense too. And it's more fun as a creator to do things that you're like, yeah, this is the when you have it in you, you just have to make the thing. Cody Sams has a really good question. What other writers' work do you look at for inspiration and ideas?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Within the world of role-playing games, I, of course, look towards folks like Chris Perkins, the people who have a lot of high-profile skill and all of that. But I look towards Dan Dillon, my friend and fellow Kobold Press writer, just because he knows, well, mostly because he runs D&D in a very different way than I do, and he writes D&D in a very different way than I do. And I look towards people who provide a different experience than what I normally would. It lets me broaden my horizons and that sort of thing. When it comes to fantasy in general, I love looking towards... I actually read a lot more sci-fi than I do fantasy, and I think that inspires like the D&D that I create. I love Octavia Butler. I love Ursula Le Guin. She does fantasy also. The late Ursula K. Le Guin now. I love her work. I look towards Clive Barker. He creates worlds that are strange and bizarre and dark and twisted, but always have a little bit of hope in them. Who's one other person? I want to round this out. My girlfriend really loves Tamora Pierce, and so I've been reading a lot of that. A lot of the female fantasy authors of the 70s, 80s, and 90s that sort of go overlooked by our current canon. Tamora Pierce, Diana Wynne Jones. She wrote Howl's Moving Castle. And speaking of Howl's Moving Castle, the films of Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli are an incredible inspiration on what I write. There is a sort of impressionistic feel, this almost childlike wonder, and the twisting and the breaking of that childlike wonder that I think Studio Ghibli does better than any other animation studio in the world. And finding a way to translate those feelings that they represent in a visual medium into what I do in a text-based medium is incredibly hard, right? I can't think of anyone who really can translate the feel of watching an animated movie into a book, but I think I'm better for trying it. I'm better for making that attempt. Cool, so those are some of my favorite authors.
I would recommend Mickey Zucker Riker to that list if you're looking from that era fantasy authors. She does an amazing job. Last of the Renshai is what you want to check out. It's about this tribe of Norsemen that nearly get wiped out because they're kind of reviled and feared by every other Norseman because all they want to do is sword fight and kill things and find Valhalla. So the book starts off with them being nearly wiped out. It's really good.
Cool. Yeah, I've just added that to my list. I've got a big book of books I need to read, so that is in there now.
Matter of fact, like thinking about it, I'm like, I gotta check Audible and see if that's on there so I can start listening to those again.
Oh yeah.
And my Axe wants to know, what advice would you have for a writer whose dream job is to write for a company like Geek and Sundry or Wizards of the Coast?
Geek and Sundry or Wizards of the Coast are two very different companies. So I will talk about them individually rather than as a whole. First and foremost, the best advice I can give to a writer, no matter what field you are, is keep writing, keep publishing it, to whatever capacity you can. If that's on a blog, great. If that's on Kindle, that's great. If you can send it to a publishing house and get it published in print, that's beyond your wildest dreams, great. But no matter what you're doing, keep writing, keep self-promoting the hell out of yourself, because you're the only person who's going to do it. And as people get to know what your work is and people get to know who you are as a writer, people will know what they can expect. And when it comes to companies, when it comes to brands, when it comes to people who are not quote unquote artists, but people who are in the business of selling things, they need to know what they can expect from you. So building your own personal brand is vitally important. Also from there, know what they want. If you want to write for Geek and Sundry, if you want to write for Wizards of the Coast or Paizo or IO9 or Polygon or whoever you want to write for, know what their brand is. Know what sort of content they publish. Do they want editorials? Do they write about video games? Do they write about tabletop games? What kind of writers do they want? Do they want super serious? Do they look for someone who has a more lighthearted take? I know that Geek and Sundry and Nerdist, for example, they really love publishing positive articles. They don't like giving bad reviews. They would rather avoid giving a review entirely if it's going to be a negative one. And if you really like writing negative reviews, if you really like warning people away from stuff, then you'll probably not be happy at a place like Geek and Sundry or Nerdist. And that's just the intersection of who you are as a writer and who they are as a company. So you'll save yourself some heartache if you go that route. When it comes to places like Wizards of the Coast, know that they are in the business of a very specific type of D&D. D&D, as we know it, as gamers and as independent publishers, is a huge spectrum of stuff. There's all sorts of things you can publish in it, and it's really all up to you as an independent artist. When it comes to D&D as it's published as a first-party product, they have a really specific brand they want to maintain. They want the core concept of D&D. They want that fighter, rogue, wizard, cleric stuff, and when they deviate from the high fantasy of the Forgotten Realms, like in Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft, they have a really strong and compelling reason for doing it. They wanted the Gothic horror setting. They knew that Tracy Hickman was available as a consultant, and so they leapt on that opportunity to change things up and give people something different from the 3 adventures that had come before it. They want to deal with the iconic characters of D&D. Few people are more iconic in D&D than Strahd von Zarovich. Perhaps only folks like Vecna and Acererak and Zastam, coincidentally, all 3 liches, are more iconic than Strahd, or Tiamat, or the Demogorgon. You have to know the history of D&D and be willing to really dig into it and find something that, frankly, will appeal to a very broad audience. If you don't want to appeal to a broad audience, if you have some niche tastes, if you want to talk about, if you want to go this cool sci-fi fantasy route like maybe Warcraft is doing right now, or like the Adventure Zone did for D&D, then that's not really what Wizards is looking for. And that's fine. It means that you have the chance to create your own creative voice and carve out your own niche in the D&D community and let people know that that's the kind of writer that you are. And once people know that's the kind of writer you are, well, as they said, if you build it, they will come. You have to self-promote, you have to shout it from the mountaintops, but if you build it, people will notice. And people will know that such and such is an excellent designer of science fantasy stories, for example. That is someone that if, game company X, indie studio X, we need a writer for our science fantasy story. If you've made waves in that field and you have created that reputation for yourself, they will seek you out. But in the meantime, you better go to them and you better say, hey, I'm a premier in my field. You need me on your project. Let's work together.
Yeah, kind of to speak to that, several points that you made. One, if you're not going to speak up for yourself, don't expect anyone else to.
Yep.
If you're not going to promote yourself, don't expect anyone else to. And the other thing is, there's Tribality, Gnome Stew, and even Nerdarchy. There are websites that you could write for. That there's no, I believe they're all volunteer. I know we are at the moment working towards paying writers, but we're not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
But like our website this month, we're going to hit our highest ever with over 60,000 views on the site. So we're growing, and other people are starting to notice. So like when you talk about getting noticed, well, you might need to develop a body of work, whether it's on your own website, or if you want more visibility, find websites that will accept volunteer authors. And at first you might have to work for free until you can get to the point where you can then work for Geek, a
Mm-hmm.
Geek and Sundry, or a site like that. So it's kind of like you have to pay your dues, and you have to have a body of work for them to see. But not only that, if you can get your stuff on a site that is already getting viewed, then there's just a chance that those people will actually see it anyway. And maybe you won't have to push as hard to get them to notice you. So there's some food for thought. Also, just engage in the community. When you do stuff, make sure you put it out there on Twitter. There's a huge D&D community out there. On Facebook, there's groups there. On Reddit, you can engage in discussions over there. So there's tons of ways that you can do things. And this is like the golden age of doing anything you want to do. You no
Mm-hmm.
longer need for a company to kind of like tap you on the shoulder and raise you up. You can do it yourself, if you put in the hard work. Where before, like you had like a publisher had to find you, or something, or an art director had to find you. Well, with the internet, you can be your own art director, and you can be your own publisher if you need to. And there's
Mm-hmm.
plenty of places out there. Nord Games is always accepting submissions, so you can submit to them, and if your work is good, there's a possibility that they will hire you, and they also pay decent as well. So there's
Mm-hmm.
that never hurts either. uh
Yeah.
Shab and Bill, did you work mostly on story or mechanics? Which parts were your favorite? I'm gonna guess he's talking about the Critical Role
Mm.
campaign setting.
Yeah. Actually, hold that question for just a sec. I'll get back to it ASAP. I have one last addendum on getting started as a writer. Um, don't be afraid to work your way up. There are a lot of small, like you were talking about, Dave, there are places that will pay nothing. There are places that will pay practically nothing, like half a cent per word, which is, terrible, but terrible for a professional, right? Terrible for someone who makes their living solely doing this, but not so terrible for someone who's doing it as a hobby. Um, I got my start with Kobold Press, um, or writing for Kobold Press, that is, by getting noticed through a design competition. And that is not always, let me say that design competitions are not always a very fair or reputable way to get work published. I think there are a lot of less than scrupulous publishers out there who will use design competitions to steal labor from you, get free work out of you, and then publish it in a book and not recompense you in any way. Um, but of course, places like Kobold Press, trustworthy publishers, are, well, I just said it, they're trustworthy. You write something good for them, they will notice it, they will publish it in a book, and then you have an in. I think Kobold Press does a design competition once or twice every year. So it's not uh, the most consistent way of seeking work, but I got my foot in the door by creating an awesome mini dungeon for them in their Lethal Lairs competition. They learned my name because of that, but they didn't offer me work immediately after. They were like, well, very cool. Thank you for submitting this thing. We're going to publish it in our Book of Lairs. And let me tell you right off the bat, like, that's not my best piece of work. If you go to the Book of Lairs and you find Monument to the Thunderer, treat it generously. That was one of the first bits of published RPG work I ever did. But from there, after I had gotten my foot in the door, it was up to me to open it. A week after, they had accepted that thing and I had won that contest, I started pitching to them. I had Wolfgang Bauer's email address. I sent him 3 paragraph-long pitches saying, hey, I'd love to write for you more. You guys seem like great people to work for. I have ideas that I think would benefit both of us. Here are some article ideas for your web blog. Here are some things that could be published in a book on the DMs Guild. Here are some things that could be published in a book that you kickstart. They were like, okay, let's start you off on a small project because you've only done one thing for us. But how about you write Gem Dragons of Faerun and we'll publish it on the DMs Guild, which I think is an awesome piece of D&D design. The Gem Dragons rock. I love them. If you're looking for dragons that your players don't expect, that have weird breath weapons and presences, I'm advertising a little bit now, but you can find that right there. But like, that's how you do it. You find your opening and make sure that they like know who you are, find a way to ingratiate yourself to the publisher, and then just be relentless. You have to fight for yourself. You are your own gladiator in this ring. You had something to say, Dave.
Yeah, I just want to say one. The links to the DMs Guild are in there, and that is one of your credits. Will show up right away. 2, explosive loogies. That's all I really had to say.
Yeah. One of those dragons, the Amethyst Dragon. As I was going through and I was researching their past incarnations in Dragon Magazine number 32 or whatever, and in the 3rd edition Monster Manual 2, that Amethyst Dragon hawks up. They call it a lozenge. they spit up this little chunk of gemstone, and then it explodes into in a million razor sharp shards when it hits you. Like, that's the sort of silliness you only see in early D&D. And it's the sort of silliness that I love to bring into the game. And if you're being dead serious about it, like a razor sharp exploding piece of gemstone is nothing to laugh at, but it's so funny. You have it when your players are laughing at it. You've done a good job, right? They're happy, they're engaged. Anyway, you asked me a question just a second ago. What was the question?
I'll definitely. So the one thing I thought, though, is thinking about the Amethyst Dragon. I was just thinking of a cat getting ready to spit up a hairball, right? And the venturing party is just laughing their ass off, like, "What are you gonna do?" He's about to chuck a hairball, and then all of a sudden, exploding gem shards of death everywhere. It was James Leslie had asked, when you're writing something like a campaign setting, is there a particular formula that you follow? Is there a place to start and expand from?
What is the kernel that starts the campaign setting? I'm creating a campaign setting for an upcoming campaign right now. It's in the back of my mind always, and I think of. I'm very narratively minded as a designer, so this advice may apply most to people who have a story in their head. But I think of the themes that I want to produce. Like, this might sound a little English classy, but I was an English minor in college, so that's where my head is at. I start with, what do I want my players to feel in this campaign setting? Do I want them to feel despair? Do I want them to feel heroic? What tone do I want to give to them? And I'm very fortunate because I have players who will go along with my BS, who will accept the tone of a certain campaign, and to the degree that players can run with it. Of course, there's the usual level of laughter and D&D silliness and crazy player character plans, and that's fine. I expect that. But when push comes to shove, they know what the tone of the campaign setting is. Tone is a much better word for it, actually. Think of the tone of your setting. Ravenloft has a horrific and bleak tone. The Forgotten Realms has a heroic and epic tone. Greyhawk has a dirty and lived-in tone. And so once you can visualize that, for me at least, everything else spirals out from there. I can create locations and characters that embody that in certain ways? How can I think of important NPCs that the players can interact with from there, because that's how I can interact with the world. Those NPCs are my conduit, and though they aren't the main characters of the story, they allow me to give information and help guide the player characters from there. In my Rebellion in Dragos campaign setting, the Monster PC campaign, I had two NPCs in particular that the players interacted with very frequently. One was the villain of the campaign, Princess Evelyn, and her retainer, a lady called Tiamat. And that name was important, and the players recognized that she was named after this evil dragon goddess. And I was able to subvert their expectations with that, because she was the more sympathetic of the two villains. She was sympathetic to the cause of the monsters and the oppression that they faced, and she tried to subvert her liege at the same time. And so the players had a very interesting dynamic to work off of from there. How far can they push Tiamat into helping them without raising the wrath of the princess? And so the campaign worked out from there. And from there, from the NPCs, I go to locations. So it starts from tone, goes to NPCs that represent the tone, and goes from locations that the NPCs can call their homes, and that the player characters can call their homes and interact with. But that's just the way I do it. I think that other people who are more mechanically minded could start with like dungeon locations. What are the most interesting places to explore in this campaign setting, and why would the player characters want to go there? I could create a location, a campaign setting that has a mega dungeon in one corner, that has an entrance to the Underdark in another, and those would all provide adventure hooks for the characters to dig into. So I think at the end of this, it all comes down to being able to know what you like as a game master, and to know what your players like as players, and find the middle of that Venn diagram and live in it. That's what I have to say.
Oh, all of that's really, really great advice. Sorry, I have to keep flipping back and forth with the mute. D20 Milk, I believe it was, asked early on, and I meant to ask you, and I got distracted. He had a really great question. He wanted to know about, and wanted you to talk about your mobile. And at first, I didn't.
That. I'm not actually at home right now. I'm in a friend's house. That is a mobile of Indian elephants, I believe. I think the person whose room I'm sharing at the moment, they love going to East Asia. They were just in Vietnam for a couple of weeks, and this, I think, is a souvenir. You can't see it very well, but the paintwork on each of those elephants is really beautiful.
Yeah, we're asking the hard-hitting questions here in Nerdarchy. At first, I'm like, what are you even talking about? When I saw it in the chat, I'm like, is this phone sitting someplace? Mobile? And I'm like, oh, mobile.
Oh, yeah, that thing.
I had to pick that out. I also want to point out, too, like, when we're talking about trying to get started, like, Nerdarchy is looking to launch their first Kickstarter this year. And that literally has been written by someone that has contributed on our website for the last couple of years. And it's like, everything's already written, and we just need maps and art. And we're like, we want to pay the guy that wrote it, right? So, that's all part of the reasons why we're going to create a Kickstarter. And he did something that was, in our opinion, was good enough to incorporate into a product. So, like, you just never know where things are going to go and how it's going to go. I mean, and there's no promise that this is even going to work out. We might try a Kickstarter and it might flop, or it may do exceedingly well. And when I reached out to the writer, I was like, hey, you already wrote this stuff. What if we put this in a book and then we, like, actually pay you for it? And and I'm like, I believe like the industry standards right now is like something like 4 to 6 cents a word, and I'm like, we have no problem with doing that. And if it does really well, we can discuss it further from there. Who knows? So you just don't know where things are going to go. Just get in there and find your way, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Since we're on the topic of rates of pay again, I'm going to give some information to anyone who wants to be an RPG freelancer, just a little bit of baseline info. The rate I won't go below right now is 5 cents a word. If someone is paying me less than that, I need to find a way out of that. I need to finish that contract as fast as possible and say, I have to do 5, or sorry, I can't work with you anymore. If you are just starting out, like I said earlier, you will find that you will not be paid 5 cents a word under any circumstances. You'll be working for either for free or for half a cent a word or for 1 cent a word, or there are some generous small press publishers that will do 3 cents a word. And 3 cents a word, as bad as that sounds, is not that bad. There are very few people, very few publishers who can afford to pay 3 cents a word because the profit margins are so slim, because people pirate RPG PDFs, because people don't buy them, because they don't have the advertising reach to get more people to buy them. So for a starting freelancer, 3 cents a word, that's pretty good. The industry standard, like if you are in the top echelons of RPG publishing, that's Wizards of the Coast, Paizo, and not a lot of other people, 8 to 10 cents a word is what you're going for. But by the time you're at that level, they will be offering. You won't have to fight for that 8 cents. They will be offering that to you. There was a question a little bit ago about what was the tone for Eberron, back when we were talking about tone. Swashbuckling. For Eberron, you were playing swashbucklers, or pulpy. You were playing pulp action heroes like Indiana Jones or stuff like that.
So we have a question that came in from Facebook from Xavier. What is the typical average word count for published adventures?
Good question. So I am the editor for a Patreon publication called EN5ider, EN World EN5ider. It's been running for about 3 years now, and it publishes weekly articles and adventures. And right now we aren't publishing new adventures. We're converting an older adventure path called Zeitgeist, The Gears of Revolution, which I think is very fun and very pulpy and very swashbuckly. But when we were publishing new adventures, I commissioned adventures at 7,000 words apiece. And I'd say 7,000 words is a good word count for one-shots or two-shots. You can get away with writing an adventure on 1 page. Check out the 1-page dungeon contest that runs annually. There is some really tight design that goes into making an adventure on a single page. So easily doable, that. When I was working on a bigger project, I wrote about half of this book, and that was about 70,000 words out of me. So it really depends on the size of the product you're creating. A one-shot can be anywhere from like 1,000 to 7,000 words, whereas a campaign-spanning adventure is measured in the hundreds of thousands.
So we got one last question. We're up on the hour. Like I said, it always goes by really fast. And that is from Ryan. And I think it was from Ryan. Whole chat just jumped on me and I lost it. They wanted to know what Ryan Douglas. What is your favorite campaign setting?
Ooh, my favorite published campaign setting. Yeah, I haven't actually played in a lot of published campaign settings. I've probably played the most in the Forgotten Realms. I'm most familiar with the Forgotten Realms because when I do Adventurers League content or I do anything with Wizards, that's where it's set, and so I know a lot about it because of that. I love Ravenloft because it's so thematic. It is super. It has its tone down. It knows what it's about, and if you're not planning on playing a gothic horror game in Ravenloft, you don't need to be there. The same goes for Planescape. It's sci-fi feel and it's very unique tone. If you don't want to play a Planescape game, get out of Planescape. And so there's a bit of a conundrum there because all of my favorite RPG settings are ones that I will not use generically. I can't go and set any old game in Ravenloft or Planescape just because I want to run D&D. It has to be a very niche idea that both I have to be on board with and my players have to be on board with.
So I was just laughing at some of the commentary in the chat. All right, guys, we are past the hour mark. I don't want to hold James hostage, but I do appreciate you hanging out with us today. I appreciate everyone hanging out in the chat. We're
Dude, it's great talking with you.
90 plus people watching, so it was awesome. And we'll definitely have to have you back on sometime.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, guys, until next time, stay nerdy. And remember, all of the information is in the description. Go click those links.
Yeah, if you wanna follow me, if you want to see the D&D stuff I'm making in the near future, you can follow me on Twitter at James J. Haeck. Middle initial is in there, J.
Or you can click the link in the description to it. We got your socials covered.
Oh, nice. Thanks.
All right, guys. Until next time, stay nerdy.